Hey there, friends. There's a lot of buzz going on right now about Joe Biden, or at least his handlers, wanting to implement a new executive order regarding universal background checks. You'll remember in the unconstitutional, bipartisan, John Cornyn and those bunch of clowns helped push through this law last year, the bipartisan, safer, whatever the juicy little name is that doesn't apply. There was a section in there that we talked about, myself and many others, about if you earn profit selling a firearm. Now, there was a lot of questions about, oh, well, if it's a profit, how do you prove it's a profit, and all this kind of stuff. I want to drill down a little bit closer to that because, again, this is really close to them clamping down on this a little bit harder and taking advantage of their very slick and crooked wording in that bill that was already passed. Remember, that is already a law. And the ATF and the White House have already shown that they're willing to reinterpret wording in existing laws in order to make those laws have more teeth and put more honest, law-abiding Americans in jail, or at least consider them felonies and fine them heavily. I want to talk a little bit about profit. Okay, the section in the bill that talks about profit says the term to predominantly earn a profit means that the intent underlying the sale of disposition of firearms is predominantly one of obtaining pecuniary gain, which means just accepting money, as opposed to other intents, such as improving or liquidating a personal firearms collection. Okay, guys, first I want to talk about the word profit. I talk about this a lot, and I tell people that if a word is in existing law and an alternate meaning of it can be used, it will be used. These people are snakes who put these bills together. They know what they're doing. They are creating loopholes purposely inside these bills. So understand that if a word can have multiple meanings, those multiple meanings are all expected to be utilized and taken advantage of in the wording of that bill. Profit. What most of us think of when we hear the word profit is that if you are a retailer, look down at number 2, 3, and 4. That's what we typically think of, the excess of returns over expenditures in a transaction or a series of transactions. Number 3, net income, usually for a given period of time. And number 4, the ratio of profit for a given year to the amount of capital invested or to the value of sales. So that's basically saying that when you put money up, you have books that record the amount of money that you bought this widget for. Let's say you bought it for $1. The net income, if you sell it for $2, is going to be $1. You made $1 of profit. That's what most of us think about when we think about profit. And that's what most of us, I don't want to say naive, but innocent people would think of when looking at this, because that makes the most sense, right? The fact that we can still use number 1, a valuable return. It does not say net. It doesn't say minus the capital that you invested and whatever is left over. It says a valuable return. So that means money received is considered profit. That's the meaning that will be used. Please don't fall into the trap that, oh, there's no way that the politicians would do that. Man, that's kind of crooked. Surely they wouldn't do that. Surely you're not that stupid. So this is already left open based on this meaning to screw people over and to trick them and give the ATF and the federal government the means to throw pretty much anybody in jail who sells a firearm without claiming their, quote, profit. Now you know why they needed those armed 87,000 IRS agents, right? And let me take that a step farther. If you are not a gun retailer, right? You're not an FFL, you don't do this for a living. So when you buy a firearm, right? I'm not an FFL, I'm not a retailer. I bought this Glock 19X. So when I bought it, it doesn't go into, quote, inventory because I don't run a business. So it's not on my books. So that's not, even though it's a capital investment, that is not necessarily something that I'm logging for tax purposes. I'm not looking at that as an expenditure. I'm not looking at that as a capital investment regarding my taxes. If I turn around and sell that, it's being sold for a full profit. The net profit, if I sell it for $500, would be $500. Because again, I'm not in the business, so that wasn't considered an investment or inventory to begin with. That was considered my stuff. So when I sold my stuff for $500, the government will look at that as a $500 profit. Otherwise, I would have to admit that I am in the business of selling guns, and that was a capital investment of mine that I intended to sell. So then I would have to say, all right, I'm what they would call an illegal FFL now because I'm in the business of making a profit. So you would have to admit that you're in the business of selling firearms without an FFL if you intend to claim that as a capital investment with the intent of selling it for a net gain at some point. I know this kind of gets off into the weeds, but it's a trick to try to get you to admit, oh, no. I have that on my books. When I paid $499 for this gun, I had it on my books as inventory. Well, then they're going to ask you, well, I thought you weren't an FFL. I thought you weren't an unlicensed FFL. Now you're saying you are? Okay, we have another conversation that we need to have with you now. So this is a trick to get you to either make a full-blown profit because you didn't have that as a capital investment to begin with, and this was just your stuff, and you sold it, and whatever you sold it for was your net profit based on a honest, everyday individual just selling a piece of his stuff. That's a profit. You got to claim that with the IRS. If you didn't claim that, and you say, oh, well, I mean, I bought the gun for $500, so when I sold it, it was a zero. It was the net profit was zero. Then they're going to be like, well, wait a minute, so that makes you an FFL now. But you're not an FFL, so that's an unlicensed FFL. And again, another conversation that they're going to want to have with you. This is the ultimate slippery slope. This is going to create people having to out themselves, and people are going to, I'm telling you, people will incriminate themselves based on what they say after that. And I don't even want to get into the argument that if they were talking about net profit for the individual like you and I, who are not FFLs, of how inflation has impacted that. So if you bought a Glock for $500 3 years ago, chances are you cannot buy that same Glock for $500 now. It's probably $550. So that means in order for you to break even for what your dollar is worth, you would have to sell it for $550. So is the ATF and the IRS now going to say, okay, we're going to take into account that there was inflation? Are they going to do that math for you? This whole thing is a wild anthill waiting to be kicked. And it looks like the Biden administration plans to kick it within the next couple of weeks. Look for an executive order clamping down and putting more teeth on this very thing very soon. Again, possibly in the next couple of weeks.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.